What up, everyone? Today I want to discuss one of my favorite video games in this segment of Does It Hold Up? This is a game that may not necessarily be my all-time favorite game, but it's definitely on the list, and it is one of the best games in that particular series. And again, I don't necessarily think it's the top game in that series, but it's definitely top-notch. And that is The Legend of Zelda: The Ocarina of Time. Now, I replayed the game recently, and it wasn't on the N64, it was actually on the GameCube on this port. So, let's dive right in. Does this game hold up? Well, the short answer is yes, it does. It does very much so. However, let's start with, I guess, the negativity that I found. This might sound odd as a gripe, but I was generally disappointed at the way Link could move in this game. Now, this comes directly after playing games that came after Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, like Wind Waker and Twilight Princess, Skyward Sword, where Link got more moves that he could perform during fights. Like how he could jump to the side, roll behind an enemy and hit him with a sword strike, do the helm splitter, killing blow, stuff like that. I found myself in Ocarina of Time frantically doing what I thought were supposed to do those moves, only to realize, number one, it's not working, and two, it's not going to work in this game because those moves aren't in the game. Now, I realize that is an incredibly stupid thing to punish the game for, because it was the first 3D Zelda, and it didn't have those moves to begin with. Those moves were largely put in based on what developers learned through Majora's Mask as well as Ocarina of Time. But that does say there are some improvements in Link's fighting ability. Yes, that does hinder a bit of the enjoyability of the Ocarina of Time. It's like when you play A Link to the Past and you see Link has a lot better movement. He can move diagonally, not just in a straight line, horizontal and vertical. He can move diagonally, and he has the spin attack. When you play Link to the Past and you put the very first game, The Legend of Zelda, in your Nintendo, and you realize just how restricted Link was back then, you notice it. You miss some of the newer moves. Ocarina of Time, unfortunately, you feel those moves that are missing when you play it. However, I got over it really quick, which goes to show you how much I have played that game back in the day, and how, a lot like riding a bike, the way you played the games, if you play them enough, you don't really forget. You get back into the groove, you get momentum, and it's like it's 1998 all over again. Now, I could list other gripes where we're frustrating that we're fixed in other games. A lot of it is the horse combat. How you can't lock on to enemies when you're on the horse in Ocarina of Time, that, if I remember correctly, was fixed in Twilight Princess. But I find one ridiculous complaint like that is enough. Overall, like I said, when I started getting into the game a lot more, and that's like, I would say probably after Dodongo's Cavern, the second dungeon, is when I really started to get back into the game. I was able to start playing like it was 1998 all over again. And that's how well the game is held up, as far as controls are concerned. Despite having better moves in later games, this game does not feel tedious to play. The controls are still fluent. That's one of the reasons why it stands the test of time even today, is its controls. The controls are polished. The lock-on system is great. It really helped the move from 2D to 3D, where in the 2D Zelda games you wouldn't have needed a lock-on, and in the 3D you may not necessarily have needed it, but it makes the game a whole lot easier. It makes killing like Keese and essentially the bats, for those who aren't familiar, a lot easier to kill when you can lock onto them. So yeah, that's great. Graphic wise, obviously it has not aged well. Personally, I find that entire generation of gaming has not aged well. I don't care if it's the PlayStation 1, the Sega Saturn, or the N64, or any other obscure console that didn't really have a lot to offer North American gamers. I find that entire generation has not aged well game-wise. Playing games like that, I see either incredible pixelation where we didn't quite have the technology to make good looking composites yet, or everything's a polygon. And Ocarina of Time falls into the polygon category. Now, just because everything's a polygon and it hasn't aged as good as maybe the Super Nintendo has, as far as I'm concerned, that doesn't mean the game is unappealing to look at. I look at it like watching older movies. It's fun to see how we essentially did stuff back then. And since it's a game that I was old enough to play when it was new, it has a lot of nostalgia, and I find when it's at least nostalgic on top of polished gameplay and solid story, which we're going to get into shortly, you could forgive certain flaws, which is great. Now, I just mentioned the story. Let's go into the story. Playing through the game this time, there was something I felt that I didn't feel back when I played it new. And maybe it's because I haven't played the game in close to 10 years up to this point. But the great part I found about this story was when it started with young Link and young Zelda as children as kids, trying to fight evil. And since when you're a kid, you're incredibly naive and you don't necessarily understand nuance, you do see things as black and white. And since they saw the world that way, they really flubbed up the entire kingdom. Now, they didn't necessarily beat that theme over your head. You have to read into it a lot. It's something I find you do have to read into a little bit. But the theme is there. Where Ganondorf, the main villain, was able to manipulate these kids into getting him what he wants. Which I thought was a great storyline. However, unfortunately, there are points I have to deduct on the story where you don't necessarily understand why Ganondorf... It's not that you don't necessarily, actually. You're never provided an actual reason of why Ganondorf is crusading against the Hylians. There are theories as to why he is, but the game doesn't actually tell you why. Which I find is kind of lacking. The only real reason you kind of get is that he's Ganondorf. He's the villain. He's evil. Which is fine. I love Ganondorf. Which is fine. I'm fine with that. It's Ganondorf after all. Ganondorf is one of my favorite Nintendo characters. In the game Hyrule Warriors, when I found there were levels you play as Ganondorf from his point of view where you're actually attacking Hyrule Castle, damn, I was satisfied on that. I want a full-fledged Zelda game where it is that. Where you are Ganondorf. and you're taking over Hyrule. I think that would be great. I think that would sell. But back to Ocarina of Time. So, providing Ganondorf with at least a motivation would have been nice. And very much further exploring that theme of kids trying to do the work of adults and failing miserably. Which ends up, yes, also in the ending. I'm not going to go into it, even though this is a 20-year-old game that a lot of us have played, and we probably all know the ending anyway. But, to be fair, I won't spoil anything further. So, polished controls, decent story. Next thing that I found great is the dungeons. The dungeons followed enough of a linear path, at least the dungeons formed at least enough of a linear path that you could follow and figure it on your own. Which was great. It's a game where I don't think you do need a strategy guide just to complete it. You may need a strategy guide to find all 100 of the gold Skulltulas or all of the pieces of heart. But that's great. That's fine. The dungeons themselves were easy, like I said, were easy to navigate. The bosses... Now here's the thing with the bosses. I remember them being a lot tougher 20 years ago. Whereas now, maybe it's because 20 years of practice, or 20 years of playing the game, you learn tricks and you just wipe out you just wipe out the bosses because you've been playing the game 20 years. But I do have to say, I remember them being tougher. I'm not trying to sound like, ooh, I'm a super gamer, I'm so good at games, I practically invented the whole video game idea. No. It's not coming from that. It's just it's how I feel. Sure, there are some gripes we could make, like there are very little side quests and whatnot. Or the Master Sword is supposed to be this totally awesome sword, the best sword that was ever crafted. It was crafted by the gods, and oh, by the way, here's the big Goro sword, it's better. Something I found ridiculous. Yes, I'm sorry, I found that ridiculous. It's supposed to be, you know, God's gift to Link. Here's a sword that will vanquish evil. And then later on, here's a better one that isn't made by the gods. Just seems weird to me. It makes me think, okay, well, is the Master Sword all that or is it not? But now we're just getting ridiculous. All in all, Ocarina of Time does live up despite its visuals not aging well. And that is because, despite the visuals, it is built on a solid control scheme, on a solid world to explore, with a solid enough story that still captivates us to this day. With enough themes that if you played it as a kid and now you're playing it as an adult, you can notice more things about that story that you wouldn't have got as a kid. And that's, I think, why it lives up the most. So, whether you can hunt a copy down at a hawk shop, a thrift store, or a used game store, or you buy a copy on the virtual console, it's worth checking out. It's worth enjoying. So, pick one up, play the game, enjoy. And if you disagree, don't buy the game, and enjoy not playing it. But either way, leave a comment down below with how you felt of the game to continue the conversation. If you have any suggestions, also leave a comment, consider subscribing. And all in all, have a wonderful day.